I've said it before. No matter how much prep you do as a game master, nor how many tricks you may have figuratively up your sleeve, players in your role-playing game are going to do something or go off in directions that you have nothing ready for. But there's no reason to panic, and I'm going to explain why. Welcome to Indeterminate Infinities, where we discuss multifarious aspects of the art of game mastering. My name is Gene. From about 4th grade until high school, I routinely went into either the school library or public library, checked out the maximum number of books they would let me take, then bring them all back only a few days later, having read them all cover to cover, and check out a new set. And now, I'm a professional writer and information architect, and I've been DMing for 49 years. Poet T.S. Eliot once wrote, "Immature poets imitate. Mature poets steal. Bad poets deface what they take, and good poets make it into something better, or at least something different." Throughout discussions in creative communities, you will find this sentiment misattributed to many, dare I say, infinitely many authors in the form of bad writers borrow, good writers steal, or bad writers copy, good writers steal. And what it means is, it's okay to take inspiration from stories you have read, movies you've watched, sets or locations from a show, and so forth. Make changes to fit your world or the adventure, and turn it into a thing or place or situations the players have jumped into. Because even if this happens the very first time you run into a game, or your preparation notes are less than a full page, you have a lifetime of experiences and shows, stories, and books in your head already. Many years ago, when I was still a teenager, I and my wargaming friends were spending more of our time together playing this new thing, Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. Each of us took turns being the GM. One game, one of my friends brought someone we didn't know very well who wanted to try learning the game, and I was DMing that night. So it was myself, 3 members of our regular group, and the new guy with a new character. There was a small town they were going into to ask some questions to get some information about a rumored monster or something. And for some reason, the new guy decided that a random NPC was lying to the party when she said she didn't know anything about what they were looking for. And right there, in the town square, in front of the whole village, he started beating her and threatening to kill her. My other players immediately tried to pull him off and stop what he was doing. I had prepared an NPC constable for them to get information from, so I had him intervene and arrest the whole party. I hadn't thought about or designed a town jail or anything, but I'd seen countless shows where a small town jail consisted of 2 cells and some kind of space for the sheriff or marshal or whoever, so that's what I described. I decided the pre-created constable needed to get back to basically patrolling the town, so I made up a second constable, or a deputy constable, who would stay at the desk in the jail and keep an eye on the PCs. And because my 3 regular players had spent several minutes explaining to the new guy that not everything he sees in the adventure is a monster, and that he'd get a chance to make his case to a judge or someone, probably just have to pay a fine, then get on with their business, I decided to lean into that. I based the deputy constable on the character of Sergeant Schultz from the 1960s sitcom Hogan's Heroes. If you're not familiar, and the show has been off the air for decades, so why would you be? It was a very silly comedy series about, of all things, a prisoner of war camp. Schultz was a very incompetent guard who was friendly to the prisoners rather than an antagonist. Because I and all of the players had seen dozens and dozens of episodes of the sitcom, my portrayal of just a few of Schultz's mannerisms and turns of phrase, the players recognized immediately, and it forced the tone of the adventure to shift into comedy instead of the grimdark environment the new guy was trying to play in. I used the Schultz clone to give the players some of the information I'd planned on them getting from the pre-made constable. And while the conversation unfolded, I decided the town was too small and too far from the capital of the kingdom for it to have a full-time judge. So the elderly knight, who was essentially lord of the manor, was the person who heard their case. After the players had explained why they'd come to town, he did charge them a fine for assault and disturbing the peace, but he also gave them more information about my planned adventure and even promised them a substantial reward if they eliminated the monster that had been terrorizing the locals. Many sessions later, a larger subset of our usual gaming group, now including the aforementioned new guy, were in the capital city looking for information about a different rumored dungeon. The new guy decided for some reason that the creature they were pursuing had a weakness for toys, and so he became insistent that they needed to find a toy maker shop. Because that particular player still had a tendency to resort to violence in inappropriate situations, I wanted to make the shop very lighthearted. It would be easy to start imagining shelves of dolls or similar toys and start thinking about certain nightmarish horror movie situations, right? It just so happened that in an episode of Hogan's Heroes sitcom, it had been revealed that before the war, Sergeant Schultz had been a toy maker. I think there was even a flashback scene. Anyway, I described the toy maker like the actor who played the character, and gave him again some of the mannerisms and so some of his mannerisms and figures of speech, and the players even wound up asking the toy maker if he had a relative who was a constable. So I got to say, "Oh, you know my brother who lives in Oak Hollow." Because I'd watched so many episodes of the show, it was easy for me to portray an NPC based on the character. It even turned into a running gag, as in other adventures, I introduced more brothers of the improvised NPC as shopkeepers and so forth whenever I needed a new one. Speaking of shops, the first time players unexpectedly wanted to go to a weapons shop to interact with the people there, even though I have never been in a medieval blacksmith shop or a similar place, I just flashed back to the gun and ammo shops I would go to with my dad or my grandpa when I was a kid. And I described something very similar, including the very odd dusty shelves and the little pigeonholes with strange accessories or doodads in them. Instead of displays of rifles, I described bows and swords. I made the shopkeeper a dwarf instead of human, and I made a few other little changes to things to make it feel more like it belonged in a fantasy city. But I was just reusing those ammo shops from my childhood. In another game, players interpreted a clue I'd meant to send them to a particular temple as instead being something happening related to the Royal Navy of my fictional world, and they headed to the docks looking for a mid-level officer from a battleship. I didn't panic. I had just a few months before attended a production of Gilbert and Sullivan's HMS Pinafore, where two different friends of mine were in the cast. One of those friends had portrayed a Royal Navy ensign, I think it was. And I just remembered how he delivered his lines and how he'd held himself, and I did my best to channel his performance without using either the friend's name or the fictional character's name when the PCs found an NPC to talk to. Then I had that character, while answering one of their questions, specifically recommend they go talk to a priest at the temple I'd meant them to go to originally. Another time, I needed to describe a sacred grove in a forest, which had been mentioned in passing and that the characters decided they needed to find for the next quest. I remembered the description of an unusual and very old oak tree in a book I had read during grade school, and I described the tree as I recalled from that book. So, when you need a character, or a location, or a setting that you hadn't planned for, remembered you can take something you read in a book or saw in a movie, make a few changes to fit into your setting, and go from there. If you add this technique to the previous improvisational steps I've talked about in other videos, be curious, immerse yourself, practice out loud, your players will remain immersed in your fantasy world. And that's where we'll leave it. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please click the thumbs up button and or consider sharing. Click subscribe to be notified when new videos are uploaded. If you have any thoughts on this topic, leave them in the comments below. Until next time, keep dreaming.